This is Armageddon News. In this broadcast, we discuss the rebuilding of the Jewish Third Temple. We'll discover how the Antichrist is like Antiochus Epiphanes, and we'll discuss the Islamic agenda to establish the Temple as the seat of the Islamic Caliph. Good day. Most people have no idea how the last days will start. But the Bible specifically speaks about a period of 7-year tribulation, before Jesus appears from heaven. Biblical scholars know that the 7-year tribulation will begin with a peace treaty, signed between Israel and the Arabs. And that the initiator or mediator of this peace treaty will be the Antichrist himself, who appears as a man of peace and a promoter of peace in the Middle East. But in truth, he is a man of war, who will use peace as the Trojan horse, by promising Israel safety and security for 7 years. Most people miss the fact that the Bible says, this covenant will be with many. Not just Israel. Daniel 9:27 says, that ruler will have a firm agreement with many people for 7 years. Many people is not just Israel and Palestine. This agreement must include other nations as well. Most likely, the Arab nations, which surround Israel. These are possibly the many people being spoken of here. Part of the peace treaty may even be the recognition of Israel as a nation. And the Antichrist will be the one who confirms this agreement between these many nations and Israel. Some scholars believe that one of the main points of this peace treaty will be that the Arabs allow the Jews to rebuild Solomon's temple on Mount Moriah. The only problem preventing the Third Temple's construction is the fact that it is currently being occupied by the Islamic Dome of the Rock, built over what Jews believe to be the stone altar of Abraham. According to some biblical scholars, the Third Temple could be built right next to the Dome of the Rock. This is based on the theory of Dr. Asher Kaufman regarding the location of the Eastern Gate. That the Muslim Dome of the Rock was actually built on what the Bible refers to as the Court of the Gentiles. This belief is based on Revelation 11:1, which states that the rebuilding of the Third Temple is not to include the section of the Temple Mount, known as the Court of the Gentiles. Therefore, they believe that the Third Temple and the Dome of the Rock could stand side by side. The Bible is very clear that a Third Temple will be standing on Mount Moriah in the last days. And the only way that this could possibly occur is if the Arabs granted Israel permission to begin construction. But this has not stopped the Temple Institute from preparing the vessels and blueprints for the Third Temple's construction. Here are some of the vessels which have already been prepared. They include many types of gold, silver and copper vessels. These are vessels which the Jewish priests require to perform the daily rituals and offerings made to God. Silver trumpets for the announcement of Jewish feast days. And even a reconstruction of David's harp. The 7-candle menorah and the golden crown, prepared for the high priest, has also been made ready. Inscribed with the words, Holy unto the Lord. According to Exodus 28:36. Surprisingly, there has been a recent increase in the call from prominent Muslims to see Solomon's temple rebuilt. This is quite a shocking statement, seeing that the majority of Muslims are against Jews even setting a foot on the Temple Mount. At first glance it appears as a gesture of good faith on the part of these Muslims. But, the Bible reveals a sinister agenda behind their call to see Solomon's temple rebuilt. If given the opportunity and Islamic approval, the Jews may very well opt to build their temple right beside the Dome of the Rock. And this will probably be the most likely scenario. That we will see the Dome and the Third Temple stand side by side on the Temple Mount. But at the cost of initiating the 7-year tribulation. Once the Jews have finished rebuilding their Third Temple, they will once again instate the Jewish animal sacrifices. 1 Thessalonians 5:3, for when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as travail upon a woman with child. And they shall not escape. The Bible tells us that Israel will say to themselves, "Finally we have peace and safety." But this peace, as with all treaties signed with Arabs, will not last. For Muslims are taught by the Quran itself, to lie to infidels and create false treaties, all for the purpose of eventually getting the upper hand. It's called taqiyya and hudna. This concept is foreign to the West, who have no idea that the Quran teaches Muslims to lie, and to never honor treaties with infidels. Now it makes perfect sense why the Antichrist breaks his 7-year treaty, after just 3.5 years, and attacks and conquers Jerusalem. Because he is Islamic. But let's give more proof to our assertion that the Antichrist is Muslim. The King James Bible says the Antichrist covers the third temple with abominations. Daniel 9:27. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. Abominations in the Bible were always connected to religion. Abominations to God are idols, symbols of another god. Remember Antiochus Epiphanes. Many biblical scholars see him as a forerunner of the little horn Antichrist, mentioned in the book of Daniel. After Antiochus conquered Egypt, he then surprise attacked, and conquered, Jerusalem. Declaring himself to be God made manifest. He also put a statue of his god Zeus in the temple. And rededicated the temple, to Zeus. Outlawing Jewish religious rites and traditions, and ordering that Zeus be worshipped, as the supreme god. But back to my point, about abominations. Most people have been taught that the Antichrist's army will come from Europe or America. But what religious symbols, or abomination, could an EU, or American army, desolate the Jewish temple with? They don't have any, because their armies are not religious. Look again at the next verse and recognize there is a religion to this invading army. Because they take away the Jewish sacrifice, because of what? Transgression. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground. And it practiced, and prospered. Daniel 8:12. The Bible makes it plain that the Jewish sacrifice is a transgression or offense to this invading army. But transgression against who? Against their God, Allah. Muslims limit Jewish access to the Temple Mount, in case a Jew prays there. And many Jews have tried to sacrifice there, which has caused terrible backlash by the Muslims. Look at why this army has assembled. The Bible says they attack Jerusalem, because they are against the daily sacrifice. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice. Why would the EU or America care about the daily sacrifice? They don't. So who is against the Jews sacrificing on the Temple Mount? The Muslims. The Muslims assemble their armies against the daily sacrifice, because the Muslims claim that the Temple Mount is holy to them. And a Jewish sacrifice, they see as defiling it. So they will take away the Jewish sacrifice, because they see it as a transgression against Allah. And just like Antiochus rededicated the Jewish temple to Zeus, so too will the Islamic Antichrist rededicate the third temple to his god Allah, by making it a mosque. And he will place on its pinnacle the well-known symbol of Allah, by which all mosques are identified. This is the religious abomination of which Daniel spoke. The awful horror, or abomination which causes desolation, will be placed on the highest point of the temple, and will remain there until the one who put it there meets the end which God has prepared for him. The Bible tells those in Judea exactly what to do when this Islamic army attacks Jerusalem and enters the third temple. Mark 13:14. But when you see the abomination of desolation standing where it should not be, let the reader understand. Then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. The one on the roof must not come down or go inside to take anything out of his house. The one in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. Woe to those who are pregnant, and to those who are nursing their babies in those days. Pray that it may not be in winter. For in those days, there will be suffering. Unlike anything that has happened, from the beginning of the creation, that God created until now, or ever will happen. And if the Lord had not cut short those days, no one would be saved. But because of the elect, whom he chose, he has cut them short. The book of Daniel tells us that God will only allow the Islamic Antichrist to rule 1,290 days. From the time he sets up the abomination. When Antiochus conquered Jerusalem, he declared himself Zeus made manifest. Some believe that the Antichrist is an atheist who does not have a god. But the book of Daniel is clear that indeed the Antichrist does honor a god, the god of forces. But in his estate shall he honor the god of forces, and a god whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold, and silver, and with precious stones, and pleasant things. Other translations render it the god of fortresses. The Antichrist honors the god of fortresses, and war. A god who defends fortresses, and armies. But who is this god? He is Allah. The god of jihad and the god of war. The god of the armies of Islam. Allah is the one who told Muhammad to go out spreading Islam by war and force. Indeed, the only god of war today is Allah, the god of jihad. And just like Antiochus declared himself to be Zeus's manifestation, so too will the Islamic Antichrist declare that he is Allah's manifestation, or mouthpiece. 2 Thessalonians 2:4 He will oppose every so-called god or object of worship, and will put himself above them all. He will even go in and sit down in God's temple and claim to be God. Muslims believe in one they call the Imam Mahdi, the Islamic Messiah, who will rule the world from the Temple Mount. When the Islamic Antichrist takes his seat in God's temple and proclaims he is God, this will be a sign to Muslims that this man is the Mahdi, whom they have been waiting for. And his coming will be attended by signs and wonders, to deceive the Muslims into believing he is the Islamic Messiah. At that point, Jesus warned that false prophets would appear, trying to deceive God's people. Then, if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Messiah," or, "Look, there he is," do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear. They will perform miracles and wonders, in order to deceive even God's chosen people, if possible. In Daniel 7:25, the Bible says the Antichrist will try to change the times and the law. The times literally refers to the Islamic calendar and its religious festivals, which he will force all to obey. And the law refers to Sharia law, which he will impose on all those in his kingdom. Sharia law is the same law which undermines women in Islam. And this explains perfectly why the Antichrist does not care about the desires of women. Neither shall he regard the desires of women. Because under Islamic law, women are treated worse than animals, and even beaten publicly by men. They are forced to wear the hijab. And many women have even been put to death after becoming victims of rape, or beheaded when they've been accused of adultery by men. Women truly have no rights under Sharia law. Now you can see why the Bible stresses the point that the Antichrist doesn't care about the desires of women. The Antichrist will demand, just like Antiochus did, that all Christians and Jews worship his God, Allah, and will make it unlawful to practice any other faith, other than Islam. And Christians will be forbidden from attending churches on Sunday. And the false prophet will force all to bow down and show allegiance to the Caliph and his revived Islamic empire. And he will force all to take its mark on their foreheads or right hands, to show that they have submitted to his Islamic empire. And no one will be able to buy or sell without this mark of allegiance. The Bible is very clear that people will only receive the mark once they have bowed down in worship before the beast or his image. The Bible warns us, saying, "Whoever worships the beast and its image, and receives a mark on his forehead or his hand, will drink the wine of God's wrath, which has been poured unmixed into the cup of his anger. He will be tortured with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and the Lamb. The smoke from their torture goes up forever and ever. There is no rest day or night for those who worship the beast and its image, or for anyone who receives the mark of its name. The mark may take the form of a stamp on forehead or hand, or even a badge to be worn on forehead or right arm. But one thing is certain, it will be linked to the revived Islamic Caliphate. And those who show allegiance to the beast and his Islamic empire, which demands jihad, against Christians and Jews, will suffer eternally in the lake of fire, together with the Islamic Antichrist. So to recap, do not bow down to the Caliph, nor swear any oaths of allegiance to him. Do not take the mark of his name, as a stamp on your forehead or hand, or wear his mark, as a badge on your forehead or right arm. And do not worship the image which he sets up, even though it speaks